Good morning and welcome to Connecting America on the USA Today streaming channels. I'm Jim Rosenfield alongside Hannah Davis here at the Sunrise Diner, Roselle Park, New Jersey, as we join you every day at this time. Alisyn Camerota has the day off. Going to talk a lot about Charlie Kirk coming up because there are developments on the legal side of that case that we're going to be keeping a close eye on. But we've got other things on tap as well. We're keeping close tabs on the Caribbean now, where for the second time this month, the U.S. military struck a Venezuelan boat. It was allegedly carrying drugs. President Trump said 3 so-called terrorists were killed in the strike. But Venezuela's president, Maduro, called up reserves, preparing for more U.S. aggression. A lot of tension in that part of the world.
So, of course, watching the advancements. Here's a very interesting story, Jen. You put on the local news. Imagine this as a parent. And you see your neighborhood elementary school was vandalized. $50,000 in damage. That's a pretty big damage. And then you realize it was your kid that did it. Here's the question. Do you turn them in? Jim, I want your thoughts.
Well, first of all, they're grounded.
Okay, grounded. I like that.
And maybe you do let authorities deal with it. Let them learn, a hard lesson.
We're going to talk about this more, but I think a lot of parents would be conflicted. So you want to hear this did happen in Florida. So we'll have that full report coming up.
Okay, in our second hour, we're going to combine real estate and politics. Because have you had it with the divisiveness in America? We're going to find out the most purple places in our country where people on both sides of the political spectrum have found a way to get along. These tend to be blue cities in red states. I wonder if your hometown of Wichita made that list.
I purposely did not look up Wichita because I'm waiting to find out. But I will tell you, the Kansas sensibility is live and let live.
Okay.
Yeah, even it's a red state. There is blue in there, but there's a respect for differing points of view. Right, imagine that.
We'll see what else is on that list.
Okay. All right, that brings us to our question of the day. How important is the political climate when choosing a place to live? City must bleed red, sky is always Democratic blue, purple politically mixed, couldn't care less. So that's your choices right there. We want you to vote. You see that QR code on the bottom of your screen. Snap it with your mobile phone and cast your vote. We'll check in throughout the hour. I am interested in the results on this one.
It says right there, 100% couldn't care less. That's a small sample, very small.
Very beginning.
It might be our producer right here. So do check that QR code and let us know how you feel about that. All right, let's dive into the latest on Charlie Kirk's murder investigation. The suspect, Tyler Robinson, there he is. He's scheduled to appear in court virtually later today. Utah's governor said Robinson was not cooperating with law enforcement and may have been radicalized online. As we said, he will not be actually physically in court, but the courthouse is in Provo, Utah. This is getting underway at 3 p.m. local time there. That's 5 p.m. for those of us on the East Coast. For the latest, our Mid-America correspondent Jeremy Ross is in Chicago. He's been following this case from the minute it broke. Jeremy, what's the latest?
And good morning. Charlie Kirk growing up about 40-minute drive from my location here in suburban Chicago. Vigil was held for him this weekend in the suburbs. Now, prosecutors are preparing to file a capital murder charge today against the Utah man who authorities say held a leftist ideology and may have been radicalized online before he was arrested, ultimately in this assassination. Not a ton of details out just yet, but today starts the process that we should start to hear a lot of the factual information about what he is accused of. Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old suspect in Charlie Kirk's killing, appears to have confessed to friends in an online chat shortly before turning himself into law enforcement, according to 2 people familiar with the chat, screenshots obtained by the Washington Post. We will no doubt hear more about that as the legal proceedings occur. FBI director telling people a DNA match with the suspect did occur on a screwdriver that was found on the roof of a building where investigators believe the fatal shot was fired, ultimately killing Kirk, as well as a towel wrapped around that murder weapon. Now, J.D. Vance, the vice president, sitting in on Kirk's podcast not long ago to share moments and memories of Kirk and place the blame on words of left-wing extremism, in his words. Vice President recently adding that investigations into left-wing groups are underway, and the administration officials signaling nonprofit organizations they might be taking a hard look into, who they say are attempting to wage campaigns violently against targets like federal resources and ICE, as well as Border Patrol agents. That was their words in a recent news conference, threatening those actors, as well as the people funding those alleged activities. No official motive has been discussed yet, but we're hearing a lot about so-called leftist ideology, leftist extremism. Again, as the case starts, and that begins today, we should start to hear a lot more factual information, what happened, and what that 22-year-old is accused of doing. A lot of people will be focusing on this motive, and prosecutors will often argue it's not necessarily their job to prove a motive. They just need to prove the crime. However, this case, because of the high-profile nature of it, the political ties to it, I would be shocked if we don't see something in terms of an outline of what the motive was and obviously how it all took place. So we'll all be watching and waiting and focusing on this later this afternoon.
There's also that question of whether this will, in fact, be a death penalty case, right, Jeremy?
Yes, absolutely. And there's so much political focus on that in particular. And prosecutors will take whatever actions they can within the law to just make sure that they are not only enforcing the law, but leveling all the tools that they can of a prosecutorial nature. And of course, when you have the federal statutes available there, that is one of those tools in the toolbox that they could utilize. Again, we should find out more later this afternoon about that possibility.
Yeah, and with all the social media reporting going on, I think it's so important to wait for these reports coming out.
Yes.
With this appearance this morning. Any thoughts on what you've seen with the social media narratives going every which direction in just the last few days?
You know, the combination of hearing more about the leftist ideology drum also has a very unique timing with some of the pictures that we have seen released recently. Out on social media, you may have seen a picture of the alleged shooter wearing a keffiyeh. What is very interesting about this is the timing of all this. We're hearing again about that sort of left-wing potential motivation, not yet proven, but talked about. And then this picture released all of a sudden in the last 24, 48 hours. It's very interesting timing. Sometimes these things can obviously be manipulated by people online. The timing is suspect, along with these so-called motivations. And again, the so-called motivations become factual evidence in a court of law. And that's what begins today in earnest.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
No problem. Thank you.
This issue of social media and so much misinformation and so much speculation and manipulation of images. You have to be so careful about where you're getting your information, what the source is, because there is so much that's out there that's in fact not true.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to wait, especially what we're going to hear today, the information. And then we can start to draw some conclusions and move forward.
What else is going on, Hannah?
Okay, breaking news as you slept. Israeli military launches ground incursion into Gaza City, with officials saying the operation is still in the early stages. Now, Israel says its forces are dismantling Hamas infrastructure inside of Gaza City. Israel's defense minister declares Gaza is, quote, burning, vowing to strike Hamas with an iron fist. More than 300,000 residents have fled. Military warns up to 500,000 remaining evacuees need to move to the south immediately. Now, the ground offensive comes after days of airstrikes on Gaza City. Yesterday, the Israeli military destroyed the tallest building in Gaza. You can see that video on your screen right now. The IDF issued an evacuation order for the building, quote, due to the presence of Hamas terrorist infrastructure inside or adjacent of it.
We've seen so many of those high-rise buildings just being decimated in Gaza City. We know Secretary Rubio still in that region. He's in Qatar today, meeting with high-level officials, obviously trying to still maybe broker some sort of ceasefire deal. But he is saying basically that time is of the essence. Time is running out, he said. So not a very optimistic view about coming to some sort of peaceful conclusion as we see this ground offensive now moving into Gaza City. And also, by the way, some of the families of the hostages, there are still 20 hostages believed to be alive in that area. And some of those families have been pleading with Benjamin Netanyahu, protesting, in fact, saying, don't do this, because they believe when the ground forces go in, the hostages will also be killed in that offensive.
Well, one, and then also thinking that your family members are in that area and seeing what's going on as
Very
well.
Tough to watch. We have some breaking news out of D.C. as well. Overnight, Fed Reserve Governor Lisa Cook will remain on the Federal Reserve Board. That's at least for now. Senator Chuck Schumer posting the news saying a federal appeals court rejected President Trump's attempt to fire Cook from the Fed. This is good timing because the Fed's policy meetings start today, where it's expected to cut interest rates. The president, of course, accusing Cook of mortgage fraud as the reason for firing her. She has not been charged with any fraud. Democrats say this is the president's ploy to take control of the Fed, and Team Trump is expected to appeal this all the way to the high court, all the way to the Supreme Court. Senate Republicans, meanwhile, pushed a Trump pick to join the Federal Reserve Board, paving the way for him to vote at this week's meeting to set those interest rates. Stephen Myron served as one of the president's top economic advisors when he was nominated to serve on the board. And importantly, we're watching to see whether the Fed will, in fact, cut the interest rates, which is expected. This attempt to fire Cook seen by many legal scholars as a threat to erode the Fed's sort of long-time political independence and be more at the beck and call of the administration's desire to continue to cut interest rates, which may not, in fact, be good for inflation.
Yeah, another example of one decision, one change, setting a precedent and what that means going forward.
All right, goes back to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
All right, let's check in on the weather. What's going on with AccuWeather meteorologist Alex De Silva, who's joining us with a look at our coast-to-coast forecast. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. How are you guys doing today?
We are well, thank you. Got our coffee in hand. How about you?
Just keeping an eye on the weather maps.
You can hold a cup of coffee in one hand and still use the maps if you need to. All right, what are you looking at? What's going on?
Yeah, it's a pretty bad beach day today across portions of the Carolinas and up into the middle Atlantic as well, all due to a coastal low that's sitting down here just southeast of Virginia Beach. Now, the good news is this is not going to develop, we don't think, into a tropical entity or anything like that, but it's still going to bring some pretty heavy rain across portions of the mid-Atlantic over the next day or so, and some pretty bad beach conditions. We could even be dealing with some coastal flooding as well across portions of Virginia, portions of the Delmarva, and even down towards eastern portions of North Carolina. Pretty heavy rain as well. There's, I think, going to be an area from Virginia Beach down to Nags Head where we could see 4 to 8 inches of total rainfall. That does include what fell yesterday, but pretty rough conditions here over the next 24 to 36 hours, I think, in the middle Atlantic.
How about the tropics? Anything heating up there?
Yeah, it looks like we're finally starting to get stuff going in the tropics. We had this big lull in the middle of the tropical season, highly, highly unusual. You really have to go all the way back to 1992 to see something this long in the middle of the tropical season. Of course, 92, a lot of us remember, was Hurricane Andrew. So just because it's quiet does not mean that the whole season is going to be quiet. But we're tracking a couple of tropical waves coming across the Atlantic right now. This one, I think, is going to be developing here over the next day or so. The good news for the United States is that it should turn out to sea, but our friends in Bermuda are going to have to watch this very carefully over the next couple of days. I think it should pass by the island sometime early to middle portions of next week.
You know, Alex, we're talking about these tropical storms. Tropical Storm Mario, they're saying that there's potential of flooding and fires that may seem counterintuitive. Can you explain that to our viewers?
Yeah, we're tracking Tropical Storm Mario. Now, it's moving into cooler water right now, so it will fall apart. But what will happen is the moisture is going to get thrown north, I think, into portions of California. So you can see the surge from that moisture getting up into portions of the Southwest. And that could bring some pretty heavy rain to portions of Southern California. Some of the deserts could see 1/2 inch to 1 inch of rain. And in those areas, it doesn't take a whole lot to cause flooding. So we are concerned. Even Los Angeles, San Diego could see 1/2 inch to 1 inch of rain. So not a crazy high amount of rain, but in a lot of these areas that don't average a whole lot of rain during the summertime, that can still cause flooding. And in the areas where it doesn't rain, we are concerned about some dry lightning, which could spark some wildfires because it's been so dry in these areas.
Oh, dry lightning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Connecting America is just getting started for you. Up next, J.D. Vance, taking aim at what he calls far-left extremists he claims led to the death of Charlie Kirk. We'll dive into that story and more when we come right back.
Welcome back, everybody, to Connecting America. I hope you're having a lovely morning.
Yeah, it's a great morning so far. You know, yesterday we were talking about the fashion looks at the Emmys, right?
Yes, yes, we were.
And I asked who you were wearing, and you actually said Goodwill.
Goodwill.
You were serious.
They didn't believe me. News anchor wearing Goodwill, and second day in a row, Goodwill right here.
I said tomorrow, what can you bring in your next Goodwill?
I said on it, Jim. Our producer on the side just said, "Really, that dress, Calvin Klein dress? This would be about $200." I think I spent $14. I'm just guessing around $14. Yes, you can do a full wardrobe. I'm telling you.
And do you have a particular Goodwill store that you frequent that's your go-to?
Okay, everybody listening, here's the tip: go to the best neighborhoods. That's where you're going to find the really good stuff. Some designer stuff that's been thrown out that I would never throw out. You go in there, $14, you're good to go. So, tip of the day from Hannah.
And Mark.
Armani Mark?
Yeah.
Listen, let's get this straight. It's my father, Jack, who's the master of Armani.
Okay.
In the 80s and 90s, we're nothing but. So he's got it stashed away.
He hasn't handed down any of
I do have a beautiful vintage winter Armani black coat, but it's a little too warm for that yet.
Yeah, it is.
For those of you that missed the show yesterday, we were talking about fashion. Yeah. I admitted I was wearing secondhand clothing, and then Mark next to me starts talking about his Armani clothing in his closet. Surprised us all, so now it's Armani Mark. That's our name for him now.
It's good enough for Martin Scorsese. It's good enough for me.
I think that's a good general rule.
Absolutely.
All right, let's check on what's going on around our country, around the world. Okay, so it's not Chicago. It's not New Orleans. President Donald Trump is deploying the National Guard to Memphis, Tennessee. He gathered Tennessee leaders, in fact, and members of his administration there. You see it in that photograph in the Oval Office yesterday to sign a memorandum creating the Memphis Safe Task Force. The White House posting, "Make Memphis safe again." The task force will include the National Guard, the FBI, Homeland Security, and other federal forces, the president said, and it is modeled on the D.C. operation, which began several weeks ago. President Trump said this was all requested by Tennessee's governor, Bill Lee. We know the mayor of Memphis said, I didn't request this. This move is not necessary, but he's going along with it because he says, I don't really have a choice.
He said that, and he also said, look, if it's good for the city, then I'm happy. I think there's some hesitancy here, some resistance, but with that open mind of, if this can be a positive, I'll take that positive.
And in creating this task force, seeming to get around, the legal question, or has he? We'll see.
Right,
and he has the governor's backing in this case.
Right, but saying it's going to be a replica of D.C., we've seen in D.C. a lot of popular resistance to this move. Maybe we're going to see this repeated in Memphis and other cities around the United States.
And then we have to do the deep dive on crime and the numbers and what the impact, in fact, is.
We were just talking about this yesterday, saying in the next week or two, getting the experts on to see how have numbers changed. Did this move the needle, and in which way? And we'll bring that to you all.
Yeah, and by the way, the president is not saying I've moved on from the idea of going to these other cities.
Oh, no.
He's still talking about perhaps Chicago. I think he said New Orleans next. So St. Louis as well was mentioned. So we'll keep an eye on that for you.
So the other big story right now that keeps evolving, of course, is Charlie Kirk. Yesterday, Vice President J.D. Vance took over hosting the Charlie Kirk Show, and along with his White House colleagues as guests. Now, some of the big points, he threatened to punish people who are a part of what they're calling a left-wing network that incites violence. Other big points here, during the 2-hour show, Vance said Kirk helped launch his own political rise, giving him credit for who Vance is today. Vance urged citizens to publicly call out individuals who are celebrating Kirk's death, including informing of their employers. We're seeing this happening across the country. He repeatedly called for national unity, but then said it was, quote, impossible with those who have celebrated or condoned Kirk's killings. Take a listen.
There is no unity with people who scream at children over their parents' politics. There is no unity with someone who lies about what Charlie Kirk said in order to excuse his murder. There is no unity with someone who harasses an innocent family the day after the father of that family lost a dear friend. There is no unity with the people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's assassination. And there is no unity with the people who fund these articles, who pay the salaries of these terrorist sympathizers, who argue that Charlie Kirk, a loving husband and father, deserved a shot to the neck because he spoke words with which they disagree.
Words. That's a key part of the discussion around our country now, and this conversation about free speech and political violence for colleges and universities. This is really becoming a test. How do we balance this? How do we protect students and keep people safe on campus, but still invite speakers who may come with a controversial point of view for the country, sparking fears that we may be entering this new era of political violence, and a hearty discussion about what do we do now, and how do we bring people together?
And are we capable of a hearty discussion in this moment?
Right.
That's the overall
exchange of ideas without turning to violence. In fact, our next guest has been exploring this question with free speech experts. USA Today First Amendment reporter Brianna Frank is joining us now with more. Brianna, thanks for being here this morning on Connecting America. You wrote about this. So tell us, what does Charlie Kirk's assassination reveal to you about the current state of political polarization and violence in this country?
Well, I spoke to several experts from different universities and from different free speech groups who said that Charlie Kirk's assassination is indicative of this really difficult political moment that we're in. And they mentioned that, unfortunately, this didn't just start with his assassination. We've seen political violence happen numerous times over the last few years. A Democratic lawmaker was assassinated over the summer. President Donald Trump was shot on the campaign trail last year. And so they sort of said, unfortunately, it's just the latest in a string of political violence. And they're concerned that if efforts aren't made to address the issue, that trend will unfortunately continue.
Yeah, Brian, I'm curious. Have you spoken with universities or even major companies to ask them, are they changing who they're inviting onto their campuses, their organizations, not necessarily to censor, but in the aspect of safety?
Well, one of the things that the experts I talked to referenced was the Israel-Hamas war, for example, and how school administrators have responded in different ways to that because of safety. So, for example, the University of Southern California canceled a commencement address last year by a speaker who was an outspoken advocate for Palestinians, and they cited safety concerns. And the experts I talked to said that that's sort of the worst type of way to handle this issue. And they said that schools just have to find a way to continue having these speakers and giving people a voice so that they don't feel the need to resort to violence. And they just have to find a way to get the appropriate security resources to make that happen safely.
We've seen increasing friction at our universities, for example, Columbia University in New York City. Of course, the digital divide only seems to deepen in terms of the way people are reacting with each other on the internet. Are we seeing signs that political violence is influencing public discourse more broadly? And if so, how?
Well, one of the interesting and striking things about my reporting is that the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, just days before Charlie Kirk's assassination, published this report on college free speech rankings around the country. And one of the really striking findings was that 1 in 3 college students believe that, at least in some cases, violence can be used as a means to stop a campus speech. And so those types of statistics are what they're talking about when, when we're talking about political violence, how that contributes to polarization, and how polarization in turn contributes to political violence. And again, that cycle will just continue unless actions are made to address it, according to the people that I spoke to.
Solutions. Let's talk about ways communities, educators, leaders can promote a climate where controversial ideas can, in fact, be exchanged with an audience. Did you find that there are some solutions out there that people are coming up with to balance this?
Well, there's certainly a lot of different suggestions. Certainly, physical security is an important element of this conversation. So, one of the people I talked to said maybe that means that schools have to partner with local or state governments, for example, to boost their security resources when a controversial speaker comes. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression that I mentioned earlier actually proposes schools having at orientation, just affirming their value of free speech and trying to, orient students to this notion that it's okay to disagree with people, and we don't have to resort to violence in order to do that. So there's different suggestions being thrown out there, and I guess we just have to wait to see what actions are taken following Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Final question for me, and I want to take this to the human level, human to human. How do you operate in your own life with individuals that may have differing ideas than yourself to facilitate open conversation while still holding true to your beliefs? How do you do that personally? Maybe you have some insights that ourselves and our viewers can take.
Well, I think as a journalist, I'm just very curious about finding other people's opinions and how they reached those opinions. And based off of the conversations I was having with people for this story, it seems like that's a value that they think could be part of this solution, is people debating and inquiring, as opposed to, starting from, a certain assumption, and, ultimately just being willing to accept that we might have different opinions, and that's okay.
Brianna, thank you so much. I think that's an excellent place to start. Curious, not judgmental. Thank you so much for joining us.
And healthy that we're even talking about this, trying to come up with ways that we can talk to each other when we don't agree on policy or on certain issues in society. It has sparked that conversation, definitely.
And college campuses are supposed to be a place for discourse in our society, for an exchange of ideas. And if that, for any reason, stop, the assassins win.
What I will say, though, is we focus on college campuses, and I think it is such a great example. However, I know family members that don't speak to one another. I know friends that won't speak to one another. I always look at where can we start, and where we can start is I can only start with me. Saying being curious, not judgmental. That's actually a line from, what's the show with the soccer coach from America? Come on. Help me out here. It was really big with
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso. There you go.
Thank you. So
It's early, Hannah. We don't have that recall.
More coffee, please.
We're bringing Ted Lasso into this.
Yeah,
but to be curious, to truly understand, and not judgmental, it's not as easy as it sounds, but that can be a guiding light.
And if you don't have something nice to say,
don't tweet
say
it.
anything.
Yeah. Including at the kitchen table.
Exactly.
Right.
Especially there.
That's what Mom always used to say. All right.
Your mom's right.
We'll be right back.
Oh, save me.
Welcome back to Connecting America, coming to you from the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park, New Jersey, dishing the top stories from around the country. Question for you.
Oh.
Could you work with a family member, like full-time?
Oh.
Like a spouse or maybe a parent? Or
I see a chuckle over here. I'm excited for the
That
response.
is highly unwise.
Unwise?
My wife's a lawyer. We would just argue all the time as two competitive type lawyer types. And other members of my family, I'm not even going to comment.
Because
Okay.
I asked because our next guest does just that. It's a father-son duo.
I agree, and
Yeah.
only because I come from a family-owned business. My parents ran a furniture store for about 45 years. They did it fantastically. My aunt worked there, my grandmother. It didn't work for me.
But not Hannah.
And that's and not Hannah.
No.
In high school, I was helping them out, and I actually fell asleep in one of the beds. It was a furniture store. My mom found that, and I was not asked back.
Sounds like a sitcom episode.
Let's write the script. Let's do it. Okay, speaking of John Zogby, he can talk to us about working with family.
Yeah.
One of the country's most recognized pollsters has teamed up with his son, Jeremy, for a weekly podcast called Real Polling, Real Time with Zogby. Together, they break down the latest numbers and talk about what they mean for voters, parties, and the country at large. Before we talk about the country at large, let's take a look at the podcast.
So there's a new poll out by Gallup, and what it shows is, a level of pessimism that we really haven't seen in a long time, but also a high level of disagreement on the President Trump and the perception that he's centralizing, even usurping power.
If both parties don't learn how to humanize, the whole thing goes off the rails. And the political culture continues to devolve.
So joining us to talk about the podcast is the son, Jeremy Zogby, managing partner for John Zogby's Strategies. Jeremy, thanks for being here on Connecting America. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Before we dive into this polling, we were just talking about this. Tell us what it's like to do this podcast week after week with your dad. How is that dynamic shaping the conversation?
Well, as you alluded to, imagine working with a family member, not just a family member at a furniture store, right, which is kind of like upholstery, but pollsters, right? Politics. It's very challenging. But at the same time, it's a wonderful opportunity. We've been doing it for 5 years. I mean, not only is there a generational difference. My dad is a baby boomer. I'm a millennial. So we have that. We automatically approach the world and problem solving in some different ways. But then also when it comes to politics and current events, we probably only agree on about 80 to 90, disagree on 80 to 90%. We only agree on about 10 to 20, but we have to work together. And to answer more directly your question, there's no other podcast or program like this where people from two very different walks of life come together and have to listen to each other and comment on the same stuff that's happening.
There are so many things that you just said that I love there. Number one, I think this is showing folks how they can speak within the family, within friends, with differing views, but also how we can have these conversations at large. Another thing that you said in the clip was the idea of both parties needing to humanize. And right now I'm seeing finger pointing, and I'm seeing this across the board. And I think what we need to do is point that finger towards ourselves to look for humanity. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, that's precisely it. And I guess I could put it in more stark terms. The immediate reactions that I heard from both sides, as you said, were finger pointing. What I saw on the right, I saw mobilization, right? On the left, I saw this tendency to focus on a person whose ideas are different, or his ideas are different. So automatically, there was the loss of humanity. Now, I'm not that old, right? I'm 42 years old, but I remember a time when I was a kid where I frequently heard this. People would disagree, and people would have differences on a political stance, but you often would hear 20 years ago people say, well, it's a free country, right? And then sometimes you'd even hear other people say, you know what, when it got really tense, they would say, I don't agree with you, but I will fight for your right to believe in that. Well, we don't have that anymore. We have moved towards political tribalism. And the feature of a society that goes towards tribalism is the emphasis on the other, which means you don't see that person, that human in the other, you just see the differences. And that's where we're headed. And so we're trying really hard in our podcast to demonstrate we can talk to each other, but let's focus on the neighborliness, the family, the human, and not so much the differences. And I think if we can have more of that, we can certainly have an impact.
We've got some critical elections coming up in this country. This year, there's the New Jersey and Virginia gubernatorial races. Next year, we're going to see the battle for Congress and the midterm elections, in many ways seen as a bellwether on how the Trump administration is doing. With this type of atmosphere out there, how can this, particularly in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, how can this impact politics and the national mood? How do you see this filtering into voter behavior, including these elections coming up?
I don't think we understand just yet the totality of how the Kirk assassination will start impacting the 2026 elections. But what we can say, and the previous journalist mentioned this, and I'd like to elaborate a little bit on it, is that we're now seeing an established trend, right? And just a little bit over the last year, there was an assassination attempt or two on the president. And then, of course, there was the gruesome murder of the United Health CEO, and then now a politically famous person. So we are watching the establishment of a trend. I don't think we know the totality yet of how that's going to impact voters, but what I do know is that we have to remember that there are the independent voters. There are those, the unaffiliated, and in November of 2024, they were 34% of the electorate. They outnumbered Democrats, and they were almost as large as the Republicans. We could see a situation where more people say, I want to get away from the official political parties, and I'm going to call myself unaffiliated. And that's going to be an opportunity for both political parties to recalibrate their messaging and their intensity towards this middle group. And that's the case in every election, statewide and national.
You, on the podcast I watched, did a deep dive into independent voters and their role in the upcoming elections, and some sobering numbers for them for both parties to really take in. Right, Jeremy? And I think a quarter of those polled said neither party represents my beliefs or values. 20% both parties are ineffective or too extreme. So how do either of the Republicans or the Democrats try to appeal to independents when they have those kinds of feelings about the parties?
The amazing thing is when I look in the data, the independents see through the contradictory messaging, right? We asked about strengths and parties of each weakness from their vantage point. And the independents on the Democrats were saying they represent and they fight for the working class, okay? But at the same time, they're not reaching, they're spending too much time fighting Trump. So independents are signaling to the Democrats, stop waging war on Trump and help the working class people, because that's your brand. That's been your historic brand. And then on the Republican side, the independents notice this contradiction too, where they say, Republicans are really strong. They put Americans first, but their weakness is they don't care about the average voter. And what they're saying to the Republicans is, you were given a mandate to eliminate economic anxieties, and you're not doing that. So if both parties were to perfect their strengths, by aligning their weaknesses, stop going after Trump and focusing only on going after Trump, and start, on the Republican side, start looking like you care more about the economic anxieties that people are facing day to day, we could have a re-emphasis and a real conversation.
Jeremy, you have 5 seconds for this. Out of everything you said, what percentage would your father have agreed with?
I think on that one, probably 100%.
Okay, very good work
Wow.
this morning then. Thank you so much for joining us. Fascinating conversation.
Love to know how Dad feels about the son getting the time on Connecting America.
Oh.
Hey, what about me?
All about airtime.
We'll have to
I'm
have
the
him
elder
come back.
statesman.
We'll talk
We'd
about
love to
that.
have both of them back.
Okay, guys,
anytime.
up next, we're going to speak with a former airline pilot about a new report that's sounding the alarm about possible toxic fumes on flights and flying out later today. Connecting America, we'll be right back. I'll be watching that segment.
Welcome back to Connecting America from the Sunrise Diner here in Roselle Park, New Jersey. Mom is not putting up with misbehavior.
This is going to get folks talking.
2 moms, actually, in Florida, turning in their 12 and 13-year-olds for breaking into their school over the weekend and causing at least $50,000 in damage to the school's media center. Guess what, guys? You were caught on camera. Look at the damage. Police posted this video after they responded to an alarm at Friendship Elementary in the Daytona area. Whoa, they were busy. Police said the boys broke into the school during daytime hours, then went back later in the evening to look at the damage and then do even more damage. Sheriff's office posted a surveillance camera video of the boys, and then the moms stepped up. Each boy is now charged with 2 counts of burglary, 2 counts of trespassing on school grounds, criminal mischief, as well as theft. I mean, that wasn't just a little bit of damage there.
No, seeing that video changed the story, in my opinion.
Yeah, your feeling about what would you do?
So I don't have kids, Jim. As a father, you get the phone call. you see your child on TV.
I mean, if I saw that damage, I would want them to be taught a lesson.
Yeah.
Like, this is not okay.
Right. There's another lesson to be learned here about returning to the scene of the crime. You know,
Right.
I have no idea what they're thinking, but this is a situation where people, when they're young, is
They're not
scientifically
thinking.
proving
They're
their brains
teenagers.
are not yet fully formed.
Correct.
They need guidance.
Yeah.
My dad's a defense attorney. It's so funny you say that. That was the first thing that came to my mind. What are you doing? Don't go there. Come on. And just know that there's cameras everywhere. But in all seriousness,
Yeah.
also don't break into your school and vandalize it.
No.
I think that's an easy lesson there.
Okay, you said you're flying out today, so this story
Yes.
is major interest to you or anybody who takes this, guys, really, right?
It's either of interest or I don't want to hear it today, but I don't think I have a choice. So the Wall Street Journal has a new report saying pilots and flight attendants may be at a higher risk of breathing toxic fumes on board, resulting in possible brain and nerve damage. Now get this, since 2019, airlines have filed thousands of reports with the FAA citing toxic air leaks from engine systems that push unfiltered air into the cabin. So this has been going on for a while now.
Yeah, to help us break down these findings, we're joined now by Daniel Bubb, a former airline pilot. Daniel, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. This report mentions some flight attendants sort of having traumatic brain injuries and permanent nerve damage from breathing these fumes. From your experience, did you see any of the pilots or crew members on your flights experiencing anything like this?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I haven't personally witnessed it. However, as a pilot, as a passenger, I have smelled some of those fumes, particularly when the air comes off the compressor. We call it a bleed system, and it brings the air into the cabin and into the cockpit. And sometimes what can happen is if you have oil leaks, if you have hydraulic leaks, you can smell those fumes coming through that system. And that's what can make people feel nauseous if they're exposed to it over time, because a lot of chemicals can make people really, really sick. Some even causing nerve damage. And we've even seen links to cancer as well. So this is something that airlines are going to have to figure out. Now, they've done it with the 787. They have a different air bypass system with that, so you don't smell the fumes or anything. But the older planes, like the 737s or the Airbus A320, for example, are more notorious for having those type of fumes that people can smell.
So you just answered my next question, which are some of the planes that are having these issues more than others. One thing, they said these reports have been coming in since 2019. We're just now hearing about it. An article was written up, or at least the public at large. Why do you think it's taken this much time for this issue to get a conversation going, getting attention?
Sure. Sometimes it takes investigations quite a while to really get going. Honestly, other things too is this is going to be a major expense for Boeing. It could be a major expense for airlines to have to go back and fix the system or find a different filtration system that they can use. So sometimes it takes a while for these investigations to fully take place, for the FAA and other agencies to make decisions on them. But one of the challenges that I see with this is that it could be expensive to fix this system. And so we'll have to see what airlines do, and we'll have to see how the FAA responds to that.
Now, airlines and manufacturers say cabin air meets safety standards, but what you're saying from direct experience seems contrary to that. How safe are these chemicals in the event of a cabin fire or an emergency? Can you explain what happens in those scenarios and how they affect both the crew and the passengers?
Sure. I don't think they are safe. There are lots of chemicals used in the manufacturing of airplanes. And when people are exposed to that, for example, like a cabin fire, that can have adverse health effects on them. That's why they always tell everybody in the event of a fire, stay low, get to the ground, stay low where you have more of the oxygen, and follow flight attendant procedures. Because, like I said, there are lots of chemicals that are used in manufacturing different parts of these planes. And particularly when people are exposed to them, for example, like an aircraft fire, it can create obviously a very hazardous situation, particularly to their health. If they breathe in a lot of that smoke, if they breathe in a lot of those fumes, obviously you want to get to a place where you have more oxygen, where there's more space, where you're not exposed to these things. So that's why it's really, really important, especially during an aircraft fire, to follow flight attendants' instructions to a T. They know exactly what to do, and they will tell you what to do.
Is this a situation where you would like to see some action from regulators to force the airlines to change these systems?
I would, because we obviously want to make air travel safe for the public. And for the most part, it is. I mean, there are HEPA filters in these aircraft, and they do rotate. So that clears out a lot of the bad air. So, for example, if you have like a virus, anything of that nature, HEPA filters usually catch about 95% of that. So it's pretty clean air. It's just when you have the leaks, which sometimes can be very hard to detect, or worst case scenario, you have an aircraft fire. But yes, I would like to see greater regulation. I would like to see greater transparency between the airlines and the FAA on this. And let's make it a public health initiative to really make air travel safer for the public.
You said you're a former commercial pilot. You can answer this as much or as little as you like. I know there's a lot of stress right now for anyone working in the airlines, from stewardesses, flight attendants, pilots. Was there a particular reason you chose to change course and career?
I wanted to become a university professor, and I've been doing that now for 23 years. And I get to teach really cool aviation courses, aviation history, aviation industry with my students. At the end of the course, we go over to the local airport, Harry Reid International Airport here in Las Vegas, and we get to ride on buses around the airfield, and my students get to see how airports work and what it's all about. So that was really my impetus behind switching careers.
Yeah, I love that. And also, guys, did you see the light in his face when he answered that?
Yeah.
You're going towards what's making you happy. So congratulations, sir.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us.
Fascinating. Staying on the ground for the second half of his career.
Yeah. And he just lit up when he said that.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I've been on planes. Have you been on planes where you do suddenly smell some odd sort of odor and just kind of write it off?
Unfortunately, yes. And this does not inspire confidence. You want to feel confident when you get on a plane that you're going to land. You're going to be okay. And if people's cognitive abilities are somehow being disrupted, this is no good.
Yeah. I don't mean to laugh, but I'm a nervous flyer already. And everything you're saying right now, I'm like, oh my gosh.
This isn't helping.
Yes.
Just doing my job.
Will you text us about your flight and let us know you made it okay?
I will let you know.
How the air quality seemed to be.
And how my mental capacity is. Yes, I'll let you know all of that.
All right. If you'd like to connect with us or follow us, find us on social media. We're all over it. You can also listen to us on our podcast.
Yes.
Best of Connecting America, available every day wherever you get your podcast. Just type in Connecting America right there in the search bar, and there are our handles on social media. And we'll be back at the top of the hour as the diner fills up. Try to talk to some of the folks who are coming in for breakfast. We'll be right back.
The views expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of USA Today or its affiliates.
Good morning and welcome back to Connecting America on the USA Today streaming channels. I'm Jim Rosenfield alongside Hannah Davis and Mark Bonamo here at the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park, New Jersey. Alisyn Camerota has the day off. Hannah, we're glad you're here with us once again.
Happy to be here. Diner. Yes. Why have we been in studios our whole careers? Diners, this is where we need to be, amongst the people and, of course, the bacon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Plenty of food and great servers like Trish, who joins us every day.
She's
and they
the
work
best.
so hard. And they're here. We were talking about this earlier. You know, the diner opens at 7 a.m.
Yep.
Right.
But when we come in way ahead of that, there are people working in that kitchen at goodness knows what hours they come in to start firing up the.
And this is always the location also where we're talking about, people talk about big stories of the day. Speaking of, we have that. We're going to dive into the latest on the Charlie Kirk murder investigation. The suspect, Tyler Robinson, is scheduled to appear in court later today. Utah's governor said Robinson is not cooperating with law enforcement, meaning not speaking, and may have been, quote, radicalized online. Now, as investigators pore over his electronic footprint and messages in chat rooms, more information is coming out. The hearing will be conducted virtually. The courthouse is in Provo, Utah. It will begin at 3 p.m. local time. That's 5 p.m. on the East Coast.
Sure to be the beginning of what will be a long road ahead for Tyler Robinson as prosecutors try to build a strong case against him. And with more on that, we're going to speak with criminal defense attorney and legal analyst Kenneth Belkin. Kenneth, thanks for joining us from your car. We appreciate it. We know you got a tight schedule. Let's talk about how strong the evidence appears to be and needs to be to at this early stage for prosecutors to keep pushing ahead.
So it's a very low burden evidentiary-wise at the beginning of a case. It's only that probable cause exists. Probable cause could take many forms. It could take, for example, his intimate partner's statements about Mr. Robinson's involvement in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It could take the form of his DNA, which was at the scene of where the shooter fired from. It could take the form of the many, minutes of surveillance footage which have been released to the public so far. I'm sure there's quite a bit more, but there's certainly probable cause for him to be charged.
What type of information can we expect to come out today? Information from investigators that we can be seeing today?
I would say that you're not going to get much, right? Today is an arraignment. It's the first. An arraignment, for those who don't know, is the first time you're brought in front of a judge in a criminal case. You're publicly informed of the charges against you, and the judge sets, for Mr. Robinson's purposes, the most important, his custody status, which is going to clearly be that he's remanded. But you're not going to get into much of the evidence. They don't have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt at arraignment. That comes later. There's a discovery process where the defense will begin to have access to the material that the prosecution intends to use against them, and it is an ongoing investigation. So I expect that there's going to be an ongoing discovery process.
Now, defense attorneys like yourself, they have to switch tack sometime. New information's coming in all the time. What strategies would a defense team be considering right now?
Look, I think I don't want to, speculate as to his innocence or guilt. It seems to me like there is some compelling evidence of his guilt. The tactic they might want to try is preventing this man from getting the death penalty. That might be, if you're a defense attorney, that is probably your win in this situation, is that your client does not get put to death.
This case obviously has exploded across the nation and sparked so much conversation, so much posting on social media. How much pressure does that put, that public spotlight on this case, does it put on both the prosecution and the defense, do you think?
It puts a lot of pressure. I say this to clients of mine. I've had cases that have been in the news, and, the one thing I can tell you is it's more fun to talk about other people's cases than your own with the news, because when your case is in the news, you better believe everyone is going to behave in an atypical fashion. The judge is going to behave differently, the prosecutor, even the defense attorney, and especially the client who's freaking out that their case is, being read about by their relatives in the newspaper.
Yeah. Final question, based on your experience, what's the timeline when we would see this going to a courtroom trial? And also the timeline, you were diving into this a bit, on when we'll start to get specifics about what investigators have found, so we don't have these social media sleuths sharing their stories. We're hearing straight from investigators.
Really, we shouldn't be hearing much about the evidence until trial, because you don't want to taint a potential jury pool, but things might leak out, obviously. As far as timing, for Utah, it's hard for me to say, right? I don't practice. Man will
All right,
be
obviously
charged
we lost.
federally. In addition to the state charges, I believe he's going to be charged federally. If that happens, I would think this case could be at trial in about a year.
All right, Kenneth Belkin, we appreciate you joining us here on
thank you.
Connecting America. Great insights from you. All right, elsewhere, we're keeping close tabs on the Caribbean, where for the second
Thanks, guys.
time this month, U.S. military struck a boat allegedly carrying illegal narcotics. President Trump said in his post there were 3 male terrorists who were killed in the strike. This is Venezuela's president called up reserves, warning his country of this U.S. aggression.
And more breaking and developing news as you slept. Israeli military launches ground incursion into Gaza City, with officials saying the operation is still in early stages. Now, Israel says its forces are dismantling Hamas infrastructure inside of Gaza City. That's the reason for being there. Israel's defense minister declares, quote, Gaza is burning, vowing to strike Hamas with an iron fist. More than 300,000 residents have fled. Military warns up to 500,000 remaining need to evacuate the south, or to the south rather immediately. Now, the ground offensive comes after days of airstrikes in Gaza City. Yesterday, the Israeli military destroyed the tallest building in Gaza. I was seeing video of that earlier. The IDF issued an evacuation order for the building, quote, due to the presence of Hamas terrorist infrastructure inside or adjacent to it. So we're seeing big developments in that story, just not even the last 24 hours, the last 12 hours.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. Secretary Rubio is in the region trying that last-ditch effort to perhaps broker a deal, a ceasefire, but he's saying, time's running out to see that happen.
They were referencing the Western Wall in Jerusalem, that our alliance, the U.S. and Israel, is as strong as this wall, but it appears there could be chinks in that wall forming as we speak.
That was Netanyahu making that point. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Elsewhere, we're following another story in the region. It's been 3 years today since a 22-year-old Iranian woman, Mahsa Amini, was killed for not wearing what officials in Iran called a proper hijab because her headscarf was too loose. Amini was arrested and beaten while she was in police custody. That sparked massive street protests across Iran at the time. The U.S. State Department noted the anniversary, saying it stands with the people of Iran in their calls for dignity and a better life.
So Amy Kellogg attended a conference this past weekend marking the sad anniversary and discussing possible pathways towards democracy in Iran. Good morning, Amy. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine, thank you. And this so-called women life freedom movement was really one of the biggest, most unifying and sustained protest movements in Iran since the foundation of the Islamic Republic. But eventually people stopped taking to the streets because the response was just too violent. Hundreds were killed. And at least one person at the conference I attended a few days ago said that they feel an opportunity there was lost because the proper infrastructure or organization around these protesters simply didn't exist to allow them to perhaps effect regime change. Now, they did win something. The hijab law is, although still on the books, not really enforced. You see women going around freely these days without the headscarf. But the Iranian youth want more. They want true freedom. They would like a better quality of life. Inflation is absolutely through the roof. This oil-rich country has power shortages and power cuts every single day. There's a water shortage. And then, of course, we saw Iran come under attack, a very humiliating war with Israel over the summer. And in the end, of course, the US joined in bombing some of Iran's nuclear facilities. So many are saying that actually the Islamic regime is weaker than it's ever been. And again, at this conference, I got a sense of momentum that people on the outside, these opposition groups, are coming together to try to be ready for the next moment. Here's what one of them, Nazanin Ansari, had to say.
So big as, I mean, those Israelis have been calling it a piece of Swiss cheese. That's how much intelligence they have from the Islamic Republic. So, and I think what is important is at the same time that there is a blueprint that only 2 days ago there was another conference of the Iranian political opposition, led by Prince Reza Pahlavi, who produced actually the Iran Prosperity Project booklet.
The late Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, has been extremely active in trying to organize people in the last 6 months or so.
3 years later, what would you say is the status of the Massa movement, Amy?
Well, the movement still exists, though it's not on the streets as it was before. The war over the summer had a huge impact on society. There are people who rallied around the flag when Iran came under attack, but there are young Iranians who said they wish that Israel had gotten the job done. In other words, taken out the Iranian leadership. But there has been an incredibly harsh crackdown. As Nazanin said, the country is like Swiss cheese. It feels so infiltrated by spies. Executions are up, arrests are up. And I spoke to another activist, a woman who had been arrested for anti-hijab protests some years ago, sentenced to prison, managed to escape the country. She said Iran needs help skirting internet crackdowns, but she really feels that the change has to come from the Iranian people. Here's what she had to say.
Iranian civil society should change the regime and change everything. So right now, after that 12 days war, the situation of Iran is very bad. Lots of, Iranian activists, women's rights advocates inside of Iran under lots of pressure, and because of this, I think more sanctions or more of the things that they could do on the Islamic Republic of Iran is better than any war. Netanyahu, follow his agenda. His agenda is not help us.
And it's interesting, Mark, Jim, and Hannah, the Israeli government during that war put out a lot of messages in Farsi, in Persian, to the Iranian people via social media, asking them to take to the streets and saying things like, if you get rid of your regime, we'll be in there on day 2 to help with desalination of water and all your needs. The messaging was rather clever and it resonated with some, but actually, it is hard to say that it really will make a difference because people are scared at the moment to come out and take to the streets and ask for a change of government.
Amy, you just attended a conference. This is our final question, talking about solutions and moving forward. We focus on solutions here at Connecting America. If you had to bottom line it in 1 or 2 lines, what needs to happen? What's the hope? How can we move forward?
The hope of these people I spoke to is that we as the West and the free world, support Iran's opposition. It's not exactly clear how we do that, but they don't want to see the government strengthened by any deals with the US. And they also really need help with technology. They don't like the idea that government cuts are being made in America to groups like USAID and Voice of America being shuttered, because those were important bridges for the Iranian people to get information and technology.
Amy, thank you so much. Very nuanced and informative conversation. We appreciate you. Okay, after the break, we go to real estate shopping in so-called purple states with Mark Lawrence. This is fascinating. What are purple states? Well, stay tuned and we'll tell you. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Connecting America. We've got some sad news this morning, and this is going to be all over your social media feeds. Legendary actor Robert Redford has reportedly passed away.
Died at the age of 89, and we were just looking back and remarking on all of the amazing films that he starred in. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid,
Yeah.
All the President's Men, The Sting, The Way We Were with Barbara Streisand, The Natural. He was also an Oscar-winning director. Where he turned his sights after those early successes as a leading man. Ordinary People, he won an Oscar for as Best Director, and also significantly founded the Sundance Institute.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to forge ahead with films that had an impact on society, and took over that struggling film festival in Utah way back in 1984. And then he renamed it the Sundance Institute after that. So he is a presence in Hollywood that transcends the Hollywood of today. 89 years old, a remarkable career.
Yes.
He was honored as well for his talent. And I'm sure we will hear today from so many of his co-stars, Jane Fonda, Barbara Streisand, and so many others. So a big loss in the entertainment world and our culture as well. Robert Redford at the age of 89.
And for transparency, we found out about this 30 seconds ago.
Yeah.
So we're reacting in real time as well, sitting here talking about the films that made the impact on us. Just such a legendary actor with such a prolific career. And if there's any silver lining through the rest of the day, hearing those remembrances, how he impacted people, and the art that he put into the world.
Very true.
Mark Lawrence, of course, sitting here joining us because we want to talk about this phenomenon of where people are choosing to live as we change gears here based on our polarizing political climate that we're in. So question for you, how would you like to live in so-called Purpleville? Our real estate guru, Mark Lawrence, here to talk about that. First of all, when we say Purpleville, what are we talking about?
Is that an actual city, Purpleville?
I don't know if there's a Purpleville. That's a good question. Maybe a lavender, but when they talk about purple, obviously we talk about the red. See you in beautiful red today. Blue cities. People moving to red counties where it's more conservative viewpoints. So what is a purple city? Purple city is a city that's kind of very mixed, like here on Connecting America, where we share viewpoints at both sides. Purple cities are places where, not everybody's on one side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle. You get a mixed viewpoint.
So what are some of those cities where people might want to look to move if they're sick of polarizing, living in a silo?
Yeah, they're definitely attracting people because of that. Of course, tied into that is affordability, cost of living, which plays a big factor in that. But some of those, cities are good examples are some of the southern cities that were traditionally conservative, like Atlanta, the suburbs of Atlanta, outside of the city. Raleigh-Durham, which was a traditional southern city, now seeing an influx of a lot of students and tech professionals, which are heading, to the traditional conservative base. So that those are two good examples. Denver, Colorado is another one that's similar in that regard. So usually look at what was and now see some of the migration trends in, and that leads to that mix of those type of purple cities where you get different viewpoints.
During the last election, I was actually sent to Door County, which is claimed to be the most purple county in the country. Wisconsin. Thank you. Yeah, Wisconsin, because they had voted for Obama, then Trump, then Biden, then Trump. So they would vote with whoever won. And I talked to folks on the ground there. I said, how do you live with people that think differently than you? And it's so sad we even have to ask the question. And they said, you know what? We focus on our day-to-day life, our family. We look for the connections in others. Do you see that as a commonality in these purple cities? It's not hyper political. It's let's focus on living.
I mean, I think, when you wake up in the morning, you spend time with your family, your friends, your coworkers, and how much that comes into the workplace. is a factor. Obviously, the workplace is not necessarily the place where you choose, the people who you're with. You end up with them; they become friends. But having those people with those similar viewpoints definitely makes it easier. And how much they bring into the workplace and talk about, their viewpoints is a big factor too.
But if people are actually making these moves, if they're considering, okay, I got to get out of where I am. I mean, this is a statement on how we're feeling, whether we're feeling comfortable in our home environment, in our cities where we're living. Yeah. That's a big step to say, I'm out of here. I'm moving.
Yeah, to pack up your your belongings and your family and place that you've been for a long time. That's a major decision. I mean, I know we've seen a lot of articles, New York City mayor election that's coming up, and how that may affect. I think Governor DeSantis in Florida a few times has put out the Realtor of the Year is could be Mamdani if he wins the mayoral election in New York City.
So, implying that people are going to leave New York and move down to Florida.
Exactly, he's put that out twice now, saying
we have yet to see whether that's in fact what's going to happen. But
I think he's politicking, call it, but it's an interesting thought that, and to our original point that political views do sometimes play a point in migration trends.
So we see a lot of folks. I lived in Texas for years, and we saw a lot of folks from California moving there, people that didn't like classically liberal laws in states coming to Texas for that reason. It was really interesting. Texans weren't the most hospitable to those Californians coming in. Mm-hmm. I now have property in Colorado.
Right.
So there's an exception there, the Colorado exception, folks that are moving there. What makes it different for who's moving there and the demographics?
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up. So since 2020, 3.7 million people have migrated from traditional Democrat cities to Republican red counties. And the one outlier of the 10 states that have seen the biggest migration trends inward, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, have all seen an influx of people coming. The one state in the top 10 is Colorado, actually. So Colorado, although being traditionally a more Democrat, blue leaning state, Colorado has seen an influx of people, and 40% of those people actually are highly educated that are coming in or have a high education degree. 27% of them are remote workers. So, and Colorado just has outdoor beauty lifestyle that attracts a lot of people.
Yeah, obviously, if you're going to pick up and move, a lot depends on your employment situation and how much flexibility you have to maybe work remotely or find a job in that state or that city where you desire to move.
Right, in Colorado being a place, that is attracting a lot of remote workers.
All right, a really fascinating trend, seeing folks literally packing up and moving because of politics.
Mm-hmm. It's a statement on our times.
Yeah, it really is.
Mark Florence, we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
So this brings us to our question of the day. How important is political climate when choosing a place to live? Okay, the city must bleed red. Sky is always Democratic blue. Purple and politically mixed, or could care less. Right now, it looks like 34% say I'm going Democrat. 22%, they want to go to a red state. Purple and mixed, 22%, and could care less, 22%. So a relatively even mix right there.
Or should it be couldn't care less?
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually,
that is one of my pet peeves.
Couldn't care less. Let's see if people care about this issue or whatever's on their mind. Let's go to Mark, who's continuing the conversation with the guest here at the diner. Mark.
What I want to do here at Connecting America is talk to regular people about what's on their mind. Who am I talking with this morning?
Rodney DeGioia.
Where you live, Rodney?
I'm in the Union County area.
Right. Now, it all depends on where you live. Some say parts of Union County are blue. Some say it's red. Others say parts of it are purple. Does it matter to you where you live in terms of what proclivity it goes by party, or just doesn't cross your mind?
It really doesn't bother me where. I mean, some people, it affects some people, but it really doesn't affect me.
Right. Is some of the ways it affects people like you go out, you go to the supermarket, you go to the bar, you go to a park. Do you hear people talking amongst themselves and increasingly disagreeing about what's happening in America?
It varies because, well, where my business is, it's predominantly Republican,
Right.
and that's where I'd rather be. Up here, in this Union County area, it's to a lot of people it does matter about the blue and the red, but to me it doesn't, and I don't try to indulge in that conversation with everybody.
Right. Why do you try to stay out of those conversations?
Because of the state of mind that the people has become has because of what has happened since the pandemic.
Right.
It's like forced opinions and it's no facts.
Right. Do you think that level of anger that you're seeing across the country, is that something that's palpable to you? Do you feel it?
Repeat that one more time.
When people are across the country, they're angry. There's that sense that people are angry across the country. Are you coming across that?
Sometimes I do, and
Right.
and that's where I try to stay away from. People have lost their minds out here.
Right.
Nobody's focused on what really matters anymore.
Right.
It's become blue and red, the division, and I think this country is built on division,
Right.
black and white, blue and red, Catholic, Muslim, and I don't think it's about any of that. We lost. The government is supposed to work for us, but somehow they switched it, and we work for them.
Rodney, very interesting. Thank you very much for your time. Back to you, Jim and Hannah.
Jim, can I just talk about this, Jim and Mark? These are the conversations that you can have when you sit face to face with an individual. They spoke for 90 seconds. And the truth, the honesty that came out right there, that shows me the power of conversation, whether you agree or disagree.
And also that feeling that he has that I need to stay out of the conversation because I don't want to engage because people are stating things that just aren't true. So that's his approach, is to just sort of
Protect your peace.
Yeah. All right. Coming up after a break, we're going to take a closer look at a new feature on some Apple products, a new hypertension alert feature on the latest update. We'll be right back.
Good morning and welcome back to Connecting America. I am officially, everyone, on my second cup of coffee.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's needed here.
Do what you need to do.
Connecting America.
Oh, I apologize in advance. Okay, this is interesting. If I had a smartwatch, I might get some information after having the second cup.
Yeah, about your heart rate.
Smartwatches these days come with a variety of health detection options, from heart rate to oxygen, steps, sleep patterns, fall detection, and ECG capabilities. And everyone from Samsung to Fitbit to Apple and more are trying to one-up each other on these devices.
Apple just released the latest update for its watch that can detect potential hypertension in users.
Wow.
And with more on this, we're joined by our medical expert here on Connecting America, Dr. Pyle Coley, cardiologist and adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins and Duke University. Thanks for being here, Doctor. We appreciate it this morning.
Good morning, guys. You're wearing your smartwatches?
I left mine at home, so I don't know how I'm doing. But my phone does track some stuff. It does definitely tracks my steps. How does this technology work, first of all?
You know, I'm really excited as a cardiologist about this technology and also about the concept of using everyday technology to screen people for diseases that are common. So we know that hypertension or high blood pressure, 1.3 billion people globally, and it's often a silent killer because it doesn't get diagnosed until it's too late. So what the watch does is it releases these green and red light, infrared light, and then it sees how the small blood vessels in the skin absorb that light and then reflects it back to the sensors. And then based on an algorithm, it looks at patterns to see, does your pattern match that of somebody with a normal blood pressure, or does it match somebody with a high blood pressure? And it monitors it passively for 30 days and gives you an alert if you trigger that blood pressure alarm.
So with this hypertension feature, what should someone do if you get an alert that your health might be at risk?
So I really want us to think about this technology almost as a alarm bell or a screening tool, but it's not a diagnostic tool. So this is not how we actually make the diagnosis of hypertension. So according to the American Heart Association, if you get an alarm, you need to go out and buy a blood pressure cuff, not one that sits on the wrist, but one that sits on the upper arm, and keep track of your blood pressure for at least 7 days, possibly longer, and talk to a healthcare provider about whether you actually have hypertension, because the technology is not going to pick up everyone with high blood pressure, and the algorithm, because it is an algorithm, may not work properly in some people, especially, for example, dark-skinned individuals, because it's using light technology. And so it hasn't necessarily been validated in people who have darker skin or people who already have pre-existing high blood pressure. We don't know how well the technology performs in those individuals.
You know, doctor, a lot of folks are going to be watching this, wanting to go purchase their first smartwatch. Can you tell me how these different devices or brands stack up against each other?
You know, we're doing pretty good overall. I would say Apple really has a lot of the algorithms. I, as a cardiologist, often use the ECG algorithm on my patients. And certainly this new hypertension algorithm was developed in over 100,000 people and then validated in about 2,000 more. Overall does pretty well at some of the basic things. Like you mentioned, I'm on my second cup of coffee, so it's probably doing a good job of my heart rate right now. It does a good job of step count. It does a good job of sleep wake, you know, what time we're sleeping, what time we're waking up. What it doesn't do a good job of is getting accurate numbers, because it's just a sensor. So I won't have data as to how high somebody's blood pressure is. I'll just know that it's high or it's not high. So it's more of a dichotomous response. And also it's really good about looking at trends over time rather than instantaneous readings. So I think more and more we're embracing these kind of monitoring devices, whether it's Fitbits, Apple Watches, or our rings, as a way to sort of screen people. But it's important to have the warning that it's not going to pick up every single person with disease.
Repeated warning, it's obviously a good idea to talk to a medical professional. Don't just rely on the device and say, oh, I'm fine, or there's something wrong, and start self-diagnosing.
That's exactly right. And if the device doesn't diagnose something, that doesn't mean you don't have it. So I would still encourage all of us to make sure we're seeing our doctors, make sure that we're doing whole blood pressure monitoring, keeping an eye on our, you know, our cholesterol, our heart rate, all of those types of things. And don't think that this is a diagnostic quality device. Even though some of these, just like this hypertension technology, are FDA cleared, they're not medical devices. And so don't rely on the interpretation so much so that you don't go see a doctor if you're having concerning symptoms.
You know, Dr. Coley, we were talking about this yesterday in our editorial meeting, and one of our producers was saying he purchased one for his father. And it meant so much for him to be able to see day-to-day information, keeping in touch. Again, we know that this does not substitute for a doctor, but do you see that? Do family members have a sense of peace and getting that data from loved ones they're caring for?
I think that's a great idea, and I would encourage a lot of people to do that, especially for their older parents, because it's really good at things like temperature tracking, for example. So if one of our loved ones is getting a urinary tract infection or some other type of infection, it can do a nice job of, making sure their temperature doesn't get too high and alerting you if something happens. They're even developing technologies where it looks at what's called a frailty score. How frail is the person? How active are they during the day? How much are they moving? How high risk are they for falling, all of these types of activities. So as a physician, I know that I'm relying more and more on this technology to bring people into the office.
Yeah.
Certainly our older patients who live alone or maybe have limited access to resources, I think it's a great way. And for many of us that have the older watch, they actually might be pushing a software update on a few of the older models to also develop this hypertension or high blood pressure feature. We know that 9 out of 10 of us take in too much salt, and high blood pressure is so common that I'm really excited as a cardiologist.
There's no salt on the table here, Dr. Coley.
I consumed it all, that's why.
There is sugar, however.
I'm not a fan of sugar either.
Okay. Oh, Trish. Trish is trying to hurt us. Thank you, Dr. Coley. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I love that our producer just, as he was telling us, just shared an idea with folks watching this that they can apply for their own lives. So good job, Manoj.
But when my kids start getting a device for me so they can monitor my health, I'm going to feel old.
That's another conversation.
It is important. I have an elderly dad. God bless him. He's 96 years old. He's doing great. But, there are times when you want to know exactly how he's doing. He's never alone at this point, but, you want to make sure he's okay. And I don't know that, I don't know that he would wear one of those devices, but it's something to think about.
Something to think about.
All right, when we come right back, a little Monday Night Football wrap-up with Mark to get our blood boiling, perhaps. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sunrise Diner here in Roselle Park, New Jersey. Following some breaking news domestically and abroad. All morning we've been following the news out of Gaza City, where the Israeli military began its ground offensive overnight. With more on this now, let's go to David Sussman in Israel. He's at the Jerusalem Post Diplomatic Convention, former IDF soldier, host of a popular television show in Israel, and also an Israeli tour guide. David, thanks for joining us. What's the latest you're hearing about this ground offensive underway now?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I haven't been so up in the news because I've been at this convention here where we had ambassadors from various countries, survivors from Hamas captivity who spoke, and also who is known as the son of Hamas, one of the Hamas leader's son, also came to this conference. But from what I understand, this operation began in the early morning hours, and there are ground troops who have entered into Gaza City. We knew this was coming. We've been preparing for it. We've seen the escalation over the last several days, even the last couple of weeks, with the bombardment of certain buildings that were used in Gaza City by Hamas to collect intelligence on the movement of Israeli troops in the area. So once Israel deemed that enough of those tactical high positions on those buildings were no longer usable by Hamas, the troops have now entered into Gaza City. And from what I understand, there's some fierce fighting that's going on over there. Unfortunately, now all the sit-ins have evacuated. I assume that's due to the restraints that Hamas has put on them. But from the numbers that I've read, roughly about 350,000 civilians, residents of Gaza City have fled to safe zones that have been established for them. But 2/3 of the people are still there, and hopefully Israel will be able to eliminate the 2,000 to 3,000 Hamas fighters that are still holed up in that city, and we'll be able to free the hostages first and foremost. And those residents will be able to return to Gaza City, and hopefully all of Gaza will be free of this Hamas tyranny that they've been suffering for the last 20 years.
You know, David, with your background as a soldier, can you speak from a tactical or strategic point of view? And you were touching on this a bit, but just in plain language, the difference or the intent moving into a ground invasion as opposed to bombings or being more strategic in that way. What is the goal with having troops moving in on the ground?
Well, you know, we oftentimes talk about Israel's ability to target precision missiles, smart bombs, they call them. And but those can only go so far. You really need to go into the areas. You need to sweep through the buildings. You need to locate the Hamas fighters, the terrorists, whatever you want to call them. And also you need to find the weapons manufacturing plants, the openings to the tunnels. And this can't be done solely by satellite imagery, drones that are flying above, capturing intelligence. This needs to be done with boots on the ground. So usually the final stage of any battle will be with the ground forces going in order to eliminate, every detail of Hamas's ability to attack Israel and really, when you think about it, the free world.
David, it's one thing to militarily punish Hamas, but does there not come a point where you're humanitarianly just punishing the people of Gaza who live there?
Yeah, well, that's definitely not the intention. Obviously, there's going to be some type of collateral damage. There'll be a situation where people are going to be suffering from this war to various degrees. I think Israel's done a phenomenal job. I know the UN would like to think otherwise, but when you look at the UN and the 142 states that are members of the United Nations, most of them are not free democratic Western societies with the values that you and I share. And also with the amount of funding and influence that's coming from places like Qatar and Turkey and these radical Islamic ideologies, Some of those poorer states that can be influenced with a little bit of money and the corruption that we've seen can definitely be moved to the side of those that are against Israel. And I think that a lot of humanitarian aid, in fact, I know a lot of humanitarian aid has entered into the Gaza Strip, whether it's through, the airdrops, whether it's through the humanitarian corridors that Israel has established. In fact, I would even say that more food has been brought into Gaza in the last year than they had before October 7th, 2023. It's been an unbelievable amount of aid, food, humanitarian aid that has entered the Gaza Strip in recent months for sure, but really throughout the entire war. I think there's been a lot of misinformation that's been given out there via the Hamas propaganda, and obviously the UN has put forth resolutions against Israel, but we need to see exactly who's voting in these resolutions, what states are compliant with that. When you look at the Human Rights Council, I mentioned this another time, you literally have China, you have Cuba, you have Eritrea, you have nations that abuse the human rights of their citizens on a daily basis. These are not even partly free countries. These are not free at all. And they're sitting on the Human Rights Council, and they're the ones that are putting forth these resolutions against Israel. So I think when you really take a broader picture of everything that's happening there, if you really crunch the numbers, you'll see that there's a lot of aid that goes in. In fact, the reason why there's probably a surplus of this aid is that a lot of it is stolen by Hamas. It's sold on the black markets. They're funneling the money that they receive from it into this war machine, continuing this fight. I mean, we all, obviously we fight, but we also pray that Hamas will just lay down their arms, free the hostages, and say, okay, we will not remain in a political position here in Gaza in order that, these people that supposedly they love and care about will be able to live freely and prosper and have an end to this war, and hopefully have a rebuilding process that's going to build Gaza as a place with a moral compass and a desire to live in peace with its neighbors, and particularly us here in Israel.
Thank you for joining us at the last minute from Israel. We appreciate it. Would have loved to have been able to talk to more about what the son of Hamas had to say at that conference he's attending, but we are out of time on that. And obviously, we should point out that other human rights organizations take issue with some of what David said about access to the aid that's getting in there. So there are obviously different points of view about Israel's actions on that front. All right, switching gears here. Want to talk Monday Night Football, Mark?
To the lighter side of things, you had Monday Night Football last night. The Los Angeles Chargers prevailing over the Las Vegas Raiders, 20-9. Here we see footage of Justin Herbert, the quarterback for the Chargers, on the move, finding Keenan Allen for a Chargers touchdown. Also, the Chargers had 3 interceptions during the game, a fine defensive effort. Between these two coaches for these teams, Jim Harbaugh of the Chargers and Pete Carroll for the Raiders, not besties at all. Just don't like each other. Not in each other's Christmas cards list. Have been rivals since college, rivals in the NFL, and rivals now. So friction that's going on for 20 years in football, doesn't it beg the question, can we all just get along?
In football, Mark, absolutely not.
No,
we can't.
Exactly.
And we wouldn't have anything to talk about. Like
rivalries are classic. I mean,
right.
You got the Eagles and the Cowboys, or and it goes on from there.
Sometimes you just need a little rage, unfortunately. But now, Tom Brady. He's in, he's out. He's in, he's out, he's football. He's coming out of retirement again to play flag football in Saudi Arabia.
Didn't see this one coming.
Well, Tom Brady retired from the NFL in 2023. He's set to play again in 2026 as part of a flag football event in Saudi Arabia. The Fanatics Flag Football Classic, going to be happening in March 2026 with current and former players. You're going to have Saquon Barkley, still playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, and of course, Rob Gronkowski.
I've heard that name, I believe.
Ron Gronkowski, a.k.a. Gronk and Tom Brady, famous teammates together, famous partners, leading the Patriots to multiple Super Bowl victories. But at the same time, this begs the question, why is Tom Brady back?
Look, Saudi Arabia, the paycheck has got to be something good. That's what. Mark, can you find out the paycheck for me?
Well, what I think everybody knows before I find that out is Tom Brady already has a lot of money. He signed a $375 million broadcasting contract. What's the point?
I mean, it's good entertainment. You got to give him that.
Well,
I think he wanted to give us something to talk about. So thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Hey, Trish is here with us.
Morning, guys. Happy
Good morning.
Tuesday.
Hi.
Server here at the Sunrise Diner. Are you a big football fan? Have we talked about that?
Yeah, I don't really know
No,
sports.
not into it.
No.
No sports.
No, girls like guitars and scars.
Say that again?
Girls like guitars and scars.
Guitars and
scars.
Yeah, real men who work like a physical job, like mechanics, electricians, landscaping.
So put down the football, pick up the jackhammer, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There you go.
Okay. I like that take right there.
So you've always just been attracted to the creative types, the artists.
No, I'm artist, absolutely, but someone who can actually take care of me, like my husband. Someone who can do my flooring and mow my lawn and take out the garbage and things that I don't want to do. I'm cooking and cleaning.
But you know what? You take care of things here at the Sunrise Diner.
As best I can.
She runs it. You are on it, Trish. We appreciate that.
What does your husband do?
My husband does maintenance, but he's very high up. He does a lot of properties. He does a lot of floor. Like I said, he does all the things that he does for me at home.
That's
always something to keep him busy.
Yes.
If you're in that field. Oh my gosh. All right, that brings us to our look at the question of the day.
Oh, yes.
How important is the political climate when you want to choose a place to live? Does the city have to bleed red, Democratic blue, purple and mixed, or you couldn't care less? I'm doing the correction there on the fly in terms of the grammar. And right now, the city bleeds red. That's slightly in the lead there. Thanks for weighing in, everybody. We appreciate it.
Trish, do you have a take? Does it matter where you live? Do you have to be around like-minded people, or can you just love people for people?
Anywhere that has a real sense of community.
Boom. Right there. In a real sense of community, I think people might have differing opinions, but they're still connected.
I mean, it's all humanity. We all have to get along, even if our opinions differ, and we have to open for that conversation.
Trish, have you ever considered running for office?
No, but I think it was kindergarten. They said I'd be the first female president.
Hey, you heard it here first, everybody. I'd vote.
Right.
We appreciate you, Trish, each and every day here at the Sunrise Diner.
I'm so glad to be with you guys every day.
We know you need to get back to work.
Guys, have a great
Appreciate it
rest
so
of your
much.
day. We'll see you soon.
If you want to connect with us, you can download the best of Connecting America every day, wherever you get your podcast. Just type in Connecting America in that search bar, and you'll be able to listen to us. Or you can follow us on social media. We're all over it. There are our handles at Connecting America TV on Instagram, Connecting America on TikTok, and Connecting America TV on Facebook. Hope you have a great day, everybody. That's it for today. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Connecting America.